If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, or if you require answers to specific healthcare questions or concerns, you should consult your physician or healthcare provider and not depend solely on information presented in this program.
Coming up today on To Your Health, we all need food to live, but for as many as 15 million Americans, some foods aren't just bad for their health, they're downright dangerous, causing anything from dizziness to death. We're talking about food allergies. They're on the rise, and the youngest among us are most at risk. Today, we'll talk to a mother and daughter who are spreading the word not just about the challenges of living with food allergies, but about the smartest ways to manage them. We'll also learn what might be behind the spike in food allergies and a possible cure on the horizon. That's all coming up today on To Your Health. Welcome. This is To Your Health. I'm Portland Helmich. It's a necessity to survive, and it's one of life's great pleasures. But for 1 out of every 13 American children, something as simple as food can also be risky business. Food allergies can cause anything from an itchy mouth to a potentially life-threatening reaction called anaphylaxis. Allergic reactions to everyday foods have increased among children by approximately 50% in the last 20 years. Experts aren't exactly sure why. My first guests aren't either, but they know all too well what it's like to live with food allergies day to day. I'm joined by Jill Mindlin and her 14-year-old daughter, Maya, who was diagnosed with food allergies when she was just 9 months old. Thank you so much for being here, Jill, and thank you, Maya.
Thank you for having us.
So 9 months old when she was first diagnosed, so young. How did you figure it all out?
It was really a learning curve at that age. You know, we knew nothing about food allergies, literally nothing. In fact, her first reaction was to dairy milk. So we thought, oh, well, then she can eat anything else, and we went to a party where there was no milk, there was only meat products. And we got so excited and we were feeding her all this stuff. And the next thing we knew, she was having a reaction. And that's how we found out she was allergic to other things besides milk.
And how serious are we talking about? What kinds of serious reactions has she had?
I think
she's had anaphylactic reactions.
She has. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. You know, when they're talking about food allergies, they compare it to other allergies like hay fever or things, and they say, oh, well, maybe they'll get a runny nose or something. And it's quite different with food allergies. Every reaction can be the difference, can be life or death.
What was the scariest time?
Probably the scariest time was really before we knew very much about it, I think. And she was about, I guess, a little less than a year old. We were out somewhere with the family, and she had had something called veggie cheese, which we thought was safe because it was called veggie cheese, but it turned out milk was the second ingredient.
And you're allergic to dairy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And she was very young. Like I said, she wasn't even a year old yet, and she just started breaking out in hives, and she was scratching herself, and it was just so scary to watch as a parent because there's nothing, you feel so helpless, you know. And she was just scratching all over, and she was starting to bleed from scratching everything. And we left where we were to get, at the time, I thought an antihistamine was sufficient because I hadn't learned yet about the importance of epinephrine and how life-saving it truly is. It really is the first line first-line drug for an anaphylactic reaction. But at the time, I didn't know that yet. So I was just looking for antihistamine somewhere, anywhere. And I was with my family, and we ran to a drugstore. And I remember when I got out of the car to run into the drugstore, she was in so much distress. She was just screaming, and she was covered from head to toe in hives, and she was scratching them all bloody. And she gets this look when she goes into anaphylactic shock. The way I describe it is like a Cro-Magnon man, like the cheeks swell and the eyebrows swell and just everything unrecognizable. And she was screaming so, and I just kept thinking, I just have to get the medicine. And I ran in to buy the medicine. And when I came out, my sister said, it's okay, she fell asleep. I'm sorry.
It's okay, she fell asleep?
Yeah, she thought that's why she stopped screaming, but I knew instantly that she had lost consciousness and stopped breathing. So that was really, really scary. As a parent should just never, ever see what we see as food allergy parents. But we were able to give her the antihistamine, and it did help enough to get us to the hospital.
How many times has she had a reaction like that?
I think about 5 or 6, maybe even more at this point, 7 or 8 times.
Do you remember having those kinds of reactions? Because your mom's talking about times when you were very young. Have you had something like that recently?
I did have a reaction around Thanksgiving last year and again around Christmas last year, but they did not get bad enough for me to lose consciousness because I knew what was happening and I gave myself my EpiPen. I happened to be in school at the time, so I went to the nurse and I gave myself my EpiPen and they called an ambulance and got me to the hospital before it really got bad enough to be that scary.
When you're dealing with something like food allergies, Maya, and you have to be so vigilant, you have to make sure everywhere you go, you have to tell your friends, I'm going to be there, and what are people going to be serving, and you have to think ahead so often. Do you think that that makes you grow up more quickly?
I do feel a lot more responsible and mature than people my age and even my older brother.
Who doesn't have
food allergies like I do, and I think it really is because most people my age, their biggest problem is whether they finish their homework, they have to hand in next period, but mine is really, it's life or death. Is what I'm about to eat safe for me? Even if it says so on the label, if I know my mom told me it's safe, is it really, or is there a chance that I'm gonna die at my next meal? It's that scary.
And what's that like at home to deal with this life or death fear all the time?
I feel like we get not immune to it, I don't want to say, but we've been doing it now for 15 years. So it's a part of who we are, it's a part of our lives. And I think for us, that's why an opportunity like this is so important, because spreading awareness, they say, until there's a cure, education is the key, because the more people who understand, the less likely the kindly baker is going to hand her a cookie in the bakery, because the baker might have seen this show the night before and said, oh, I better not hand a cookie to a stranger. I may not know if she can eat that or not. So we just feel the more awareness we spread, and it sort of sets food allergies apart from any other condition or disease or anything, because, God forbid you have a child with cancer or diabetes or something, other people's knowledge can't help that child. But with food allergies, everybody around her who's aware, who's thinking, maybe I shouldn't do that project with food, or maybe I should ask her mom before I feed her something, it's tremendously helpful.
What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are around food allergies?
Probably the life or death thing.
People think, oh, it's not that serious.
Oh,
she just has some itchiness.
Exactly.
Right.
And also the amount that it takes to cause a reaction, that especially for some reason, the older generation, grandparents, older aunts and uncles, they think, oh, she can just have a bite of something. Even a bite can kill. Even an infinitesimal amount can kill. So that's, I think, a big misconception as well.
And what are you specifically allergic to?
I'm allergic to dairy, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, and sesame seeds.
Mm-hmm. And so how does that affect daily life? So if you go to school or you're going to a party, what do you have to think of in advance?
Well, I have to know if there's going to be food served at a party. I have to contact the person, ask them what they're serving, and I have to say, well, like, I'm allergic to that. Can you maybe serve something else? And sometimes that can be a difficult thing to do because it's not your party. You don't want to control what everybody else is doing, but you know that if you do allow them to serve that, then you could get very sick and potentially die from it. So you have to take that risk of maybe sounding a little bossy or a little rude and say, hey, can you have something else instead? So it's hard.
It seems that if you have food allergies or if you have a child with food allergies, that whenever there's a break in your routine, that's when maybe the red flag has to go off.
That's so true.
If you go out to dinner or if you take a vacation, what do you have to do?
So interesting that you say that. It really is the most difficult times. And that's another thing that's difficult for people to understand, is that to go on vacation is usually when a family relaxes, and that's the most wonderful time, and everybody could just be carefree. And for us, there's so much planning involved and so much preparation that it can sometimes be more stressful. I mean, we still go because our family loves to travel. And again, we believe that even if you have food allergies, you can do whatever you want to do. You just have to prepare more.
So give me an example, because I don't have food allergies, so I don't have to think that way. So what do you have to, you're going away, and
we're going away.
Well,
we went to Europe last year. We went to Paris and England. England was easy because they speak the language. But before we went to Paris, we had to enlist the help of a lot of friends, we had friends who were fluent French speakers, where French was their first language. And I sat down with one of my friends in particular one afternoon, and we went through hours of what would be anything I might possibly want to say. Let's come up with every possible scenario. If I want to say, excuse me, is this safe for my daughter? Or what are the ingredients of this food? Or I need an ambulance. I've just had an EpiPen. I'm having an
So you had to learn how to say that in French.
All in French, yes. And we had it all written out. And then, of course, there's the emergency action plan, which goes everywhere with every food allergy child. It's a just a written direction from the doctor. If this happens, give an EpiPen. If that happens,
And so did you have to have it in French?
We had to have that translated into French as well. And then we literally call every restaurant. So again, with the spontaneity, we can't just decide where we want to eat when we get somewhere. We have to know in advance every meal. We usually go somewhere where we can have a kitchen.
So what do you ask? So do you call in advance and say, my child has a food allergy. Do you have a kitchen where there are peanuts present? Or
we always travel somewhere where we can have a kitchen, because that'll usually help take care of breakfast, and you can pack up lunches. So it's just one meal a day. That makes it much more manageable for us. And then we'll research restaurants, just as anybody might, to find out what's the best restaurant in Paris. But then we'll call and we'll speak to the manager. And you can tell, I would say, even Maya's good at this now, inside of 5 minutes if they get it. Not just a question of do you have peanuts in the kitchen, but can you handle somebody with food allergies? Do you know what cross-contact means, where if your chef cuts a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, he or she can't use the same knife to cut my daughter's not cheese sandwich, but whatever she might be eating. But we've been very lucky, but it just does take a tremendous amount of work.
You know what, it sounds to me like it's just a pain. Is it? I mean, don't you just sort of feel like, oh.
Yeah, sometimes it can be, but we've been dealing with it since I was a baby. So we've learned tricks on how to do it easier, and we've gotten used to the fact that it may be a little different than other people's families' vacations, but it's perfectly fine for us. We still go on vacation, we find places to eat, and if we have to pack me food, we pack me food, and then we can just enjoy it just like any other family. It's a few more steps leading up to it.
And I would think that when you're in the supermarket, you are reading every single label,
Takes us
right?
a lot longer to shop than the average person.
But maybe you're healthier as a result.
I always joke that we are, quite honestly. We used to go to, we go up to the Cape Cod a lot in the summertime. Well, now we've found ways even that she can eat. Some of the ice cream stores have non-dairy options now, but when she was a baby and we would go, I used to say we're so much healthier because if we didn't have her with us, we'd be eating ice cream every night. So you do in Cape Cod, but it just doesn't enter your transom. You're traveling with a food allergy child who's allergic to dairy, you're just not going to think to go to an ice cream store. And that's why it is easier for her, I think, in some ways than for us. There's this concept that we mourn a loss for our children, what they can't have. But she doesn't mourn because she's never had it. I'll walk into a bakery and think, oh, I'll try one of these and one of those. And sometimes I'll stop and say, oh, Maya will never do this. And then I realize Maya would never want to do this. It's not something that she feels a loss for, because it would never occur to her any more than it would for you to walk into a poison shop and say, I'd like to try that poison and that poison, So
Right.
Some of it is just a matter of us putting our own baggage aside, and it makes it a lot easier for them, I think.
Do you think that there's a silver lining in all of this for you?
Well, I've gotten to meet a lot of wonderful people because of it, and I've met people from all over the country who have food allergies and who understand what I'm going through. And so I've made a lot of great friends because of it that I talk to every day. We text and we FaceTime, and we get to share each other's problems more than even my mom can do sometimes, because they live with food allergies just like I do. And I think that's amazing that I get that.
And as part of your advocacy, you actually write a blog about food allergies?
Well, I post in a online Facebook group. So I think there's close to 100 kids in it, and it's teenagers with food allergies from all over the country. And whenever someone has an experience or goes to a restaurant that's really good, then we write about it to let everyone know. Because there's a lot of things that are difficult, but when you have so many people who understand, who go through the same stuff, and you help each other out, it makes it a lot easier.
I bet you're pretty proud of her. I would be. She seems amazing.
She's an amazing, amazing young woman. And I say this every time I meet other young people with food allergies. They just seem to have a different level of maturity, I don't want to say more intelligence than their peers, because that's not true.
Oh, go ahead, say it.
All right. Well, they do seem a little brighter just because they've always had to be on the ball. From the time she was 3, she's needed to be able to ask. Her first sentence was, read the ingredients, read the ingredients. She'd run around to you with a package in her hand because she knew she couldn't eat it. Can't eat it if you can't read it. That was the rule in our house. So, most 3-year-olds don't have to worry about life and death. They don't have to worry about what am I going to put in my mouth. They're just running and playing. So I do think that there's a different level of education and maturity that comes with this lifestyle. That's the silver lining to me personally. I think your dad has another silver lining he talks about too. We went to a conference and learned about in college, kids with food allergies have a very different college experience than their peers, in the sense that they can't really drink alcohol or do drugs because they know that if they lose their inhibitions, they might make a mistake and eat something.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
So, and they also, by the same token, can't make out with strangers because they don't know what that stranger has eaten 5 minutes ago. So that's my husband's take on a father of a daughter with food allergies. That's what he says. He says, I just found out my daughter can't drink or do drugs. This is the best news I've ever gotten. So he sees a silver lining in it as well. But it is true. We've met a number of college-age kids, and they have to be a little more responsible for their peers. They have no choice.
Great. I want to thank both of you so much for being here today. What a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
When we come back, we'll talk to Dr. James Baker, CEO and Chief Medical Officer at FARE, Food Allergy Research and Education. He's going to tell us what causes food allergies, why they might be on the rise, and what you absolutely have to do to avoid a fatal reaction. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is To Your Health, and we're talking today about food allergies, a serious and growing public health issue that affects about 4% of American adults and about 2 children in every American classroom. And the numbers are growing. To help us understand what's going on here, we're joined by Dr. James Baker, CEO and Chief Medical Officer of Food Allergy Research and Education, also known as FARE. Thanks so much for being here, Dr. Baker.
It's a pleasure.
So before we started working on this show, I really didn't know that much about food allergies. I think my only real awareness of it was going to the supermarket, and sometimes I pick up items that say packaged in a facility with tree nuts, and I know that that's a warning for people with food allergies. What is a food allergy?
So food allergies are actually allergic reactions to food. Your body has to see a food and then make an immune response to it. And as a result of that, when you see the food again, when you eat it again, you have an allergic reaction. The reaction could range from something as simple as a rash all the way to a systemic reaction, which can actually kill you. So this is actually a very important problem and really an unrecognized epidemic.
And do we know why people develop food allergies?
We have general ideas. We know that the environment's involved. We know that genetics are involved. But the actual triggers that cause this and have caused a tremendous increase in food allergy over the last 25 years really aren't clear yet.
There are certain foods that most people are allergic to. There's a base of about 8 foods. Can you list those for us?
Yes. They involve common things: egg, milk, nuts and peanuts, fish and shellfish, and soy and wheat. But there are many other things that people are also allergic to. Things like sesame can cause very severe reactions. And unfortunately, that's not part of the labeling, so you don't know if it's in the food or not.
And you talked a little bit about symptoms. So some of them can be hives and some can be almost like shock. Give us the range of symptoms.
Well, the range is very broad. A mild reaction, let's say you eat a very small amount of the food, can consist only of swelling around your lips or tingling in your tongue. You can have a systemic reaction like a rash, but you can also have diarrhea or trouble breathing. And that's a real harbinger of a bad event. Those often go into what we call shock, where your blood vessels dilate and you can't maintain your blood pressure.
Is that anaphylaxis?
That's anaphylaxis, and that's the type of reaction that can actually kill you.
So I just want to make sure I understand. Does anaphylaxis equal shock, or are there a range of reactions that are attributed to anaphylaxis?
Anaphylaxis is any type of generalized allergic reaction, but the most severe component is when you actually have shock as a result of it.
And if you're a parent and you have a newborn child, is there a way to know whether or not your baby might have food allergies, or does that child have to be exposed to the food first?
Actually, it's probably not an issue unless you've had a reaction. Without a clinical reaction that actually defines the food allergy, even if you were to try and do testing, it would be meaningless. So the first thing to look for is a reaction to a food as you introduce new foods into your child's diet.
And what about prevention? If I'm thinking about becoming pregnant, is there a way to prevent food allergies in an unborn child? Or if I have a baby or a toddler, is there a way to prevent food allergies?
We've not found any way to prevent food allergies in an unborn child. But recent research from a LEAP study that was done in England has now shown that if you introduced allergic foods early on in life, let's say within the first 4 to 6 months, you can actually reduce the incidence of food allergy. And in fact, if you wait, it appears to be more of an issue of creating allergy than if you induce it early.
So that's probably the opposite of what a lot of people are thinking. Probably a lot of parents are thinking, oh, I don't want to give my kids peanuts until they're older.
Right. In fact, in the 90s, sort of to prevent food allergy, physicians were telling parents not to feed the food to their child until they were a year old. We now know just the opposite is probably correct.
That's an interesting point. Now, what about the increase? You mentioned a little bit just a moment ago about the environment, but I think about when I was young, I don't remember anybody having a food allergy, and now they're so prevalent. What's it really about? Environmental changes? Can you be more specific?
Well, I think there are a number of things. First off, young people are very different. They live very different lives from when I was a child.
Maybe it's cell phones. Maybe it's the cell phones that are causing food allergies. I'm joking.
Probably not unless they're eating the cell phones. I think the real key is that you have a different diet. Mm-hmm. Food is much more prepared. It's much more processed than it has been. You no longer get infections because of vaccines and antibiotics, and that changes you as an individual. And your immune system doesn't mature normally. It has to see infections to sort of mature. And we think that leads to the propensity to have allergies instead of protective immunity.
So do you think the fact that we have so many antibacterial products and we use a lot of them today could be a factor?
It's not clear, and there's been no causal association between antibacterial products and food allergy. It's more a global issue where a genetically prone individual who doesn't have infections is more likely to have allergies now.
What about genetically modified foods?
No, there's no evidence that genetically modified foods induce allergies in and of themselves.
But potentially an overuse of antibiotics.
That may be a factor, but it's not directly linked. It's this combination of things. That's what actually is making it so hard to really understand what causes food allergy, that there are multiple things that are affecting this.
Could one develop a food allergy later in life? We always hear about children or infants developing food allergies, but could I develop one at 44 years old?
35 years ago, food allergy was mainly a childhood disease, and most children grew out of it by age 4 to 6. We're seeing very different things now. Young people have more severe food allergies, and they don't grow out of it. So in fact, they carry it on to adult life, and it affects their life decisions. The other thing that we're seeing is that adults are now developing de novo food allergies that they hadn't before.
What is that?
De novo means new onset food allergy as adult. And that may relate to the fact that their immune systems are sort of fundamentally different and more prone to develop allergies. Is
there any kind of cure?
There's no cure at all, and that's very frustrating. In fact, there aren't even effective treatments. So it's a huge problem, and we have nothing to give people.
Well, that sounds really harsh. I mean, I'm sure that there's research going on right now into a possible cure. Are they finding out anything?
Yes, one of the things we're doing at FAIR is supporting research, and we've started a clinical network of 25 centers around the country to actually do research. There are now two things that are coming to the forefront. One is called oral immunotherapy, which is actually feeding the food to the individual in large doses to try and turn off the allergic reaction.
In large doses or in increasingly larger doses?
Increasingly larger doses. So you start small and then build up. And this isn't a cure, but it will suppress the allergic reaction if you actually eat the food. The other thing is actually a patch, where you can put the patch on the skin of an individual, and the patch has the protein from the food that you're trying to use. So for peanut, you'd have peanut protein on the patch, and it gets through your skin into your body and suppresses the allergic reaction that way. So these are both now in final stages of testing, and we're very excited that it may provide some benefit to at least prevent reactions in children.
So these are possible treatments that are on the horizon, but they're not really being used yet?
Well, they're still in development. So we have another large range of clinical studies that are required. Hopefully, though, within the next 3 to 5 years, some of these will be approved for use.
So best practices in case of an emergency, in case you're having a serious reaction, is what?
So if you're having a severe allergic reaction, and that's often hard to determine because, in fact, if you're having a reaction, it may start with milder symptoms and then progress. The best thing to do is to give yourself epinephrine. And by treating yourself with epinephrine, you constrict your blood vessels and maintain your blood pressure for 15, 20 minutes, giving you time to get to an emergency room.
So epinephrine really, all it does is suppress the symptoms. It doesn't really make the reaction go away. You need to get to an emergency room and they're going to do something else.
That's exactly correct. It's not turning off the allergic reaction. So in fact, after 15 or 20 minutes, the symptoms will come back and they might come back more severely. So the idea is to give yourself a chance to get to the emergency room by injecting epinephrine.
And it's a shot of adrenaline.
Yes.
And how safe is that?
For most young people, it's totally safe. The only concerns are some older people that might have heart or lung disease. It might be an issue. But for most children, the risk of epinephrine is minimal compared to the risk of the allergic reaction.
And if you're a child and you have a food allergy, do you recommend parents teach their children how to use, we're calling it epinephrine, but it's also called an EpiPen, right?
An EpiPen is a delivery device for epinephrine.
And can you show us, I think you have a device with you, can you show us how that works?
Yes, I have a device.
Magically, he has an EpiPen.
An EpiPen is basically a spring-loaded syringe.
Now that's not an EpiPen though, right?
This is a trainer.
It's a trainer, okay.
Yes, but this looks just like an EpiPen. So what this is a spring-loaded device that when administered to your skin will automatically inject the epinephrine.
Okay, can you show us how it works?
Sure. There's a cap that I've taken off that you normally would remove. Once you've taken the cap off, you grasp this like this, and then you hit it hard enough on your skin that you could see the injection apparatus had come out.
So there would be a needle in an actual EpiPen.
There would be a needle on the end of this.
So you did that really hard. That doesn't hurt? It's scary to me.
No.
No?
I mean, you'll feel pressure, but in fact, most people feel reassured by that because they know that they've administered the drug.
So do you recommend that parents have their young children with food allergies learn how to use an EpiPen if they're on their own?
Yes. We suggest that's important. All children are different, so some children can pick it up at an earlier age than others, but they're the first line of defense. We also have worked hard to get legislation so that these are available in schools now and teachers are prepared to use them. And we're also trying to get them in other public places so that if there's an allergic reaction anywhere, there will be epinephrine available for young people to use.
Can I have it? So, and I think I was reading that you suggest that children carry 2 of these, that they always have 2 on hand. Why is that?
Often one injection is not enough. It will buy you 10 or 15 minutes, but it may take you a half an hour to get to the emergency room. So if you have to use it 15 minutes later. If your symptoms are coming back, use the second one. And the 2 of them together often provide enough time to get to help and to get to support at a medical facility.
So what is, as the Chief Medical Officer at FAIR, what is your message to parents who are dealing with food allergies in their children?
So the base message is that this is a serious disease. It's something that needs to be really recognized and appropriately diagnosed. But once you do that, there are ways to manage it. And we're working on therapies, and we've put together a clinical network that will support that hopefully will take us to a point where young people will have options for treatment.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So that's our show today. If you or someone you know has food allergies, there's hope. You're not alone. There are resources and support available. Check out our show page for more information. And thanks so much for watching. Here's to your health. I'm Portland Helmich.